Shalom, shalom, Israel. So I promised to get into this bill, which is apparently a hot topic, not just in Israel, but in the so-called black world in general. Is a hot topic. Yeah. So I promised to get into it, but before I go into it, I have to do a historical, or I have to illustrate a historical example of what led to this bill being passed and the significance of the bill, because we all know the ill effects of the bill being passed, but nobody's presenting the balanced view on the subject because there's a twist to it, as I alluded to before. So I'm going to get into that, but before I even get into that, let me just quickly give all praises to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Waha, Waka, Kodash. Because everything has to start and everything has to end with Yahweh or Hashem Yahushai, because He is the Most High and His Son is our mediator. So we go through Him, don't leave Him out at all. So first off, I'm going to show you an image. Now this image that I'm going to show you actually comes from a report. It's called a policy report of abortion, or the ill effects of abortion. So you can download that report. I have the report, but there's so much stuff that I want to go through that I don't actually need to go into the report, although I urge you to download it because it's an interesting read. And they drop names in the report as well. So some of the names that you see in the report are people that was upholding the Roe v. Wade decision. You would be surprised when you hear the names. But anyway, first off, let me start off by showing you this. Right. So I'm going to come closer so that you can see all the details. So the highest graph, which is this, is the deaths of our people, right, as a result of abortion, right? Then look at the deaths of our people by other means. Look, right? This one I believe, I'm seeing it in reverse, but I think that one is, yeah, AIDS. So AIDS, which was the biggest fear, or the biggest technique they used to scare us into doing stuff. Look at the minimal amount of our people that died from AIDS. Look at the figures, and then look at abortion. So actually, abortion is and has been the biggest killer of Yasha Allah. However, when they abolished Roe v. Wade, in other words, made it illegal for a woman to arbitrarily have an abortion, because they didn't remove the right for women to have abortions, but now it's in very few instances, i.e., a threat of life, or maybe the woman was raped. Because believe it or not even 1% of the women that have abortions was as a result of rape. I think the statistic is 0.35. It could be 0.5, but I believe it's underneath that as well. I think it's 0.35, which is not even 1%. So I believe within the framework of the law now, they would be eligible to have that child terminated. But all the other reasons that they were using to have abortions, that's been removed. And we've been fighting against, well, our women, let's put it like that, our women have been fighting against it. But actually, I have to say it, they're the biggest killers of our people. Right? And I'm not taking the men out of it, because we're equally to blame for the situation, right? But be that as it may, the fact is that by removing that bill, look at the figure. So look how many millions of lives would have been saved if that Roe v. Wade decision wasn't initially put in place. But anyway, it's not about this. I'm just setting up the historical framework for you to understand the context of the Illinois Non-Detainable Offences Act. Right. So first off, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go straight into the precepts that I need. Why? Because the material I'm going through, it's more or less it's going to be the same precepts. It's similar to the last lesson I did. It's similar to that. So it's redundant. It's calling out the same precepts over and over and over. And actually, what I'm going to do today, I'm just going to read all the precepts that's relating to what we're getting into now, so I can just read through the material and break it down. Yeah? Because I'm on my own, so I can't call somebody else to read precept for me. So I'm going to do it this way. So first off, I'm going to deal with all the precepts, not all, but some of the precepts that relate to the topic and get it out of the way. So the first one is in Second Ezra chapter 6, verses 57 and 59. Because what I'm doing, I'm setting up the context of that bill and why the bill was passed and why the people that passed the bill deemed it necessary to pass the bill. Right, so let me see, 57. Right, so this is the book of Second Ezra chapter 6, verses 57 to 59. Verse 57. And now, O Lord Yahweh, behold, these heathen, which have ever been reputed as nothing, have begun to be lords over us and to devour us. Verse 58. But we, thy people, we could replace that, but we, Yasha Allah, because we are his people, whom thou hast called thy firstborn, thy only begotten, and thy fervent lover. Why? Because we're likened unto the wife of Yahweh, and Yahweh is likened unto the husband of Yasharah. Are given into their hands. And then 59, verse 59, the rhetorical question is, if the world now be made for our sakes, why do we not possess an inheritance with the world? Right? It's a rhetorical question because the answer is because we refuse to keep the law, statutes, and commandments. That's the reason why. But that's the question that was asked. And then the next precept now, I'm going to go into Nehemiah 5 and 9. This is becoming one of my favorite precepts as well. Why? Because I don't remember all. My memory is not that good with numbers, Israel. So this is something that this is an issue I've had from since a child. When it comes to numbers, I'm not very good at numbers, remembering numbers. But I tend to remember the words more than the numbers, right? But be that as it may, the precepts that I have remembered tend to revolve around who our enemies are. So you always hear me quoting Psalms 83 and Judith 5 because it sticks in my head. So why this is now one of my favorite precepts because this is relating to who our enemies are. So I'm going to read it for you. So actually, what I'm going to do, I'm not even going to read the whole verse. I'm just going to read the verse that's in context. So this is the book of Nehemiah, chapter 5 and verse 9. And this is the bit of the verse that's in context. Ought ye not to walk in the fear of our God, which is relating to why we don't possess the world? So it's asking a question. Ought ye not to walk in the fear of our God, which is Abanawa Yahweh, right? Ba'asham Yahushua, in the name of Yahushua, because of the reproach of the heathen, our enemies. So you can't get it clearer than that. It's actually telling you the heathen, which is actually defined as Gawayim, which is actually defined as everybody that is not Yasha Allah. So everybody that's not of the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of the 12 patriarchs, they're all seen as Goyim, which in another word for Goyim is heathen, and another word for heathen is enemy, right? So our enemies, reproach of the heathen are enemies, right? So after that precept, I'm going to jump to Psalms 83. I shouldn't even look because I know Psalms 83. So I'm going to jump to Psalms 83, verse 2, to 8, right? So why am I doing that? Because according to scripture, precept upon precept, and also according to scripture, out of the voice of two or more witnesses. A witness is not just somebody that's talking. A witness could be somebody that wrote something down, and then somebody else wrote something down, and you use the two of those written observations to prove a point. Because the people that was writing this were prophets or scribes of the prophets, who a lot of the scribes of the prophets were prophets as well. Because Ezra was a scribe, and he was a prophet, and I believe Jeremiah was one as well, and he was a prophet as well. So it is what it is. So this is the book of Psalms, chapter 83, sign of verse 2. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, the heathens, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head, the heathens, the Goliaths. Verse 3. They have taken crafty counsel. So the reason why I love this verse, because it's basically the UN. It's explaining the UN. Prior to the UN, it was the League of Nations. But it's the same understanding. These Hawaiians come together and they plot and make decisions and make laws and legislation that's going to affect us. So we have no power, no say at all within these organizations. So let me read that again, verse 3. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones, which is Yasha Allah, because we're even hidden against our own self. We don't even know who we are. Verse 4. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation. So when it says cut them off, cut Israel or cut Yasha Allah off from being a nation, that the name of Israel, which in the Hebrew is Yasha Allah, may be no more in remembrance. Which is the reason why our people do not remember who we are, and our people have a hard time accepting even when told who they are. This is the reason why. So then verse 5, for they have consulted. So when it says they, they're talking about the heathens, the Goliaths, the enemies, have consulted together with one consent, meaning when it comes to this particular issue, which is figuring out laws and figuring out mechanisms to attack and affect us, they're all united. So usually they're not united because they all seek their own interests and they all have conflicting interests. But when it comes to this particular issue, they all unite together. There's never a conflict when it comes to dealing with us. And this is what the scripture says. The tabernacles of Edom. So the tabernacles is just another way of saying the chief house. And the chief house is just another way of saying the ruling tribe or the ruling tribes. It's like a code for that. So the tabernacles of Edom, I believe, would be the Amalekites. But it is what it is. I could be wrong, but I believe that the chief house of Edom would be Amalekites. And the wise men of Teman, I believe they were Amalekites as well. And the Ishmaelites, so the Ishmaelites are descendants of Ishmael. Of Moab, so Moab would be the Chinese. And the Hagarenes. So the Hagarenes, there's two ways to interpret that, because you can interpret the Hagarenes as the Egyptians. You can interpret the Hagarenes, because Hagar means sojourner. So you can interpret the Hagarenes as descendants of Cam that were sojourning, meaning that they weren't in a fixed location. So another word for that would be Arabs. So that's like another way to say Arabs. But the way I like to interpret it, so I'm speaking as a man now, the way I like to interpret it is because the nationality comes from the man, it's a way of disenfranchising Ishmael from Abraham, because really he should be listed as an Abrahamite, as a son of Abraham. But by listing him by his mother instead of his father, you disenfranchise him from that. So it's like a diss. That's the way I like to interpret it. It may not be the correct interpretation, but that's the way I like to interpret it. Gibal, who are Philistines, and Ammon, so the Ammon are the Japanese. I believe through the spirit that the Koreans are also listed in that as well. Some people might break it down differently, but I see the Koreans as the same people as the Japanese, whereas the Chinese are more or less the same people as the Vietnamese and that lot, right? and the inhabitants of Tyre. So Tyre is always listed Tyre and Sidon, and they're the Philistines, I believe. The Philistines, because you had the Canaanites and the Philistines. But the Philistines, they actually came through like a long journey. So they basically went to the islands in the Mediterranean. Um, so they went to Chittim. I think they were in Sicily as well, and then they ended up coming to the northwest of Canaan at that time. So they would have been the Philistines. So they're relatives, but they're like cousins then. But they know each other and they could live amongst each other. Let's put it like that. Yeah. Um, Verse 8, Ashur or Ashawa also is joined with them, and they have holpen the children of Lot. So the children of Lot is also a code for the Ammonites and the Moabites. So that's just another way of saying the Ammonites and the Moabites, which is basically the Japanese and the Chinese. So that's our precept. And then I'm going to jump to Judith. I think I'm taking too long breaking it down, so I'm going to have to shorten it. Just read it. So Judith 5, which is another one that I tend to remember as well. Get it? Judith 5. Right. 5 to 17 to 18. So let me read that. And whilst they sin not before their God in reference to Yasha'Allah. So when Yasha'Allah is not in sin before Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, they prospered, because the God, Yahweh, that hated iniquity, which is the transgression of the law, was with them. Verse 18. But when they, Yasha'Allah, or Bani Yasha'Allah, when they departed from the way which he, Yahweh, or Hashem Yahushai, appointed them, they were destroyed in many battles, very sore, and were led captive into a land that was not theirs. So that's basically linking up with Deuteronomy 28 and 68, right? Validating that we are these people that they're referring to, because this is prophetic. And the temple of their God, I like what they put there. So the temple of our God. So that's Abanawa Yahweh. Yeah. Temple of their God was cast to the ground. Right. So this happened twice, by the way. So it happened in the Babylonian captivity when the Edomites said, raise it, raise it. Yeah. And then it happened again in 70 AD with the siege of Jerusalem, when Yahushua himself prophesied it would happen, and told us what to do when it does happen. So that happened twice. And then jump from 18 to 20, verse 20. Now therefore, my Lord and Governor, because this was one of the Babylonians, I believe, right? Or maybe not Babylonian, but this was a person that was sent to get information and relay it back to the rulers so they could determine how to approach the Israelites, right? Because they were supposed to pay tribute and whatever, and they weren't doing it. And they were supposed to pay respect to the king that was the ruler at the time, and it was, they wasn't really doing it the way they wanted it to be done. So they asked this guy to come and get information. So he's relaying back the information. So let me read it again, verse 20. Now therefore, my Lord and Governor, if there be any error in this people, and they sin against their God, Yahweh power, let us consider that this shall be their ruin, and let us go up, and we shall overcome them. So this is actually the blueprint of the Psalms 83 Crafty Council. It's also the blueprint of all the laws and all the legislations that have been passed. This is even before the Roman and the Greek captivity. But it's the same model. Yeah. Why? Because it's all based on the most effective mechanism to disenfranchise the people that own the world, because the world was made for our sake. So the way to disenfranchise them is through crafty counsel. Now this is the most basic crafty counsel that works. Keep us in sin and keep us away from knowing who actually we are. Right? So that's that, Judith. So then I'm going to jump to Exodus 1. Quickly do that. Because once I've done this, the precepts out of the way and we can fly. Well, I don't know about fly because you know me, I take my time. But at least we could get to the meat. But this thing here, it has to be done in a specific way because a lot of people are giving their opinions about the bill, and it's not that I disagree with their opinions, but it's not based on a full analysis of what this situation is. It's just like basically you're making a comment on what's happening and the effects of what's happening, but you're not going digging deeper and finding out what's led to it and what's causing it to be relevant, right? So this is what I'm trying to do. So anyway, Exodus 6, let me go there. Exodus 6, right, here we go. Exodus 6, verse 1, 8 to 11. So I'm here, Exodus 6, verse 1. Salakia, chapter 1, 8 to 11, my bad, chapter 1, right? So in the book of Exodus, chapter 6, chapter 6 and verse 8. And I will bring you into the land. Let me just check this because I might be wrong. Exodus 1, 8 to 11. Yeah, I am wrong. So like Israel, I'm here now. So in the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verses 8 to 11. Verse 8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Right? Because what happened was, when we initially came into the land of Matazarium, it was because of a famine, but prior to that, as a result of Yahweh's grace and divine intervention, he actually implanted Yahweh, but it's actually Yahweh, which is Joseph, to be led there initially as a slave or a servant, but he worked his way up to being the second in command. So when we went into Egypt, the second in command, who had Pharaoh's ring or Pharaoh's signet, which is the symbol of Pharaoh's authority, right? So we was actually in a good place when we first came into Egypt. But over time, the people that ruled, the I don't even think they were Egyptians at that time, to be quite honest. I think there was somebody that had conquered or usurped themselves into the pharaonic dynasty, right? Because that happened as well in Egyptian history. But be that as it may, the pharaoh that had good relations with us and our people, he came out of office, and then over a period of time, the pharaohs that were in rulership, they didn't have that love, reverence, and connection to us. So they saw us as a threat. So let's get to that now. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, Matazarium, which knew not Joseph, Yahweh or Yahweh. Verse 9. And he said unto his people, behold, he didn't say unto the people, unto his people. Behold, the people and the children of Israel are more and mightier than we, right? Because we tend to have a lot of children when left alone. Verse 10. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, crafty counsel again, lest they multiply. And it came to pass, it come to pass, that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Right? Let's see. Exodus. Yeah, 1 to 11. Right, so that was 11. And then jump to 15 to 17. So verse 15. And the king of Egypt, which is in reference to the new king, which knew not Joseph, that king of Egypt, spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shipra, and the name of the other was Puah, right? And he said, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew woman, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, right? So that's linking back to this. That's why I started off with this. Why? Because this is actually showing you that they're actually executing the children, right? There's a reason why, because they fear us multiplying and therefore becoming mightier than them. They fear that. If it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live. Right? Is that it? 17. But the midwives, which in the verse before it said Hebrew midwives, so I'm going to say that. But the Hebrew midwives feared God Yahweh power and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them. So the importance of this is that they set up the first abortion clinic here. But unlike what's happening now, which is clearly seen by the figures, that's why I said our women are the biggest killer of Yashala. Look at the figures. This is the abortion rate, right? Check this. What did the women do? Did they comply? No. They feared Yahweh and did not as the king of Egypt, as the Goliaths commanded them, but saved the men children alive. So you see the difference? Because they fear the Most High. And what is the fear of the Most High? The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, a good understanding of all they that do his commandments. So what they feared him, so they did the commandments of Yahweh. That's who they feared, and not men, i.e., Goliaths or heathens or the enemy. Right, so now I'm going to jump to Numbers 1 and 18. Numbers 1 and 18. Nearly finished the precept phase, because once I'm done this, we're good to go. Numbers 1 and 18. Well, we all know this precept anyway. And they assembled, and Yasha'Allah assembled all the congregation. So when Yasha'Allah assembled, when all of Yasha'Allah assembled, that's the meaning or the true meaning of the church. Because the church actually means the called out assembly. So in this called out assembly, right, meaning they assembled, all the congregation, that's a called out assembly, that's the church. So when the church assembled together on the first day of the second month and they declared their pedigree, so now we're showing, now the scriptures is showing how one declares his pedigree and how one understands his nationality, or if he is, or what his nationality or genealogy is. It's showing you here. They declare their pedigrees after their families by the house of their father. So this is the point here. So the house of the father determines the pedigree. So if you have a Hebrew Israelite woman, a daughter of Zion, and she's having children with Lot, with Lot's seed, which is Ammon and Moab, which by the way in Deuteronomy we're ordered not to have children with them, or you're having children with Aisha or Adawam, or you're having children with Elam, or you're having children with Yavan, or any other heathen which is an enemy, then those children are not Yasha'Allah, even though the mother is, but the children are not. Right? That's this the point of this here. Right? So that's that. And then from there we jump to Deuteronomy 19 and 15. Right? So all these precepts I'm bringing out here, it's just to establish points that I'm going to bring out when I start to get into the bill, but I don't want to be just consistently stopping and going into the precepts. So I'm just going to deal with them, all the precepts now. So obviously you're watching this. Hopefully you're watching this. If you're watching this, you can pause and rewind, and you could link the precepts that I'm bringing out now to what I'm going to say later, 19 and 15. So we're in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 19 and verse 15. So everybody, I want everybody to listen to these ones here now, because this is actually this, and the crafty council is actually what is the bit of the undetainable offences bill that we're not looking at. This is what I want to bring out as well for balance, right? So verse 15, one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, right? Which actually an iniquity is a sin. So this is another verse that actually we could use to explain what sin is. In any sin that he sinneth, listen to this, at the mouth of two witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses shall the matter be established. So to establish anything, you cannot do it with one. Yeah? So you cannot accuse a person of a crime, just one person, because it's invalid. Now Esau does that, the Gawaians do that, but we do not have license to sin. We can't do that. Yeah? So we have to have 2 or more witnesses to substantiate, or to let me use the biblical terminology, to establish any matter. Yeah? And then the next precept is Numbers 35 and 30. For some reason, I like numbers. I always remember numbers for some reason. I don't know why. It's funny because I'm not good with numbers, so I shouldn't remember numbers, but I kind of do. So we're in Numbers 35 and 30. Let's go there. This is the book of Numbers, chapter 35 and 30. Whoso killeth any person, the murderer shall be put to death. Right? So in other words, if somebody commits murder, that person likewise shall be put to death. But listen to this. But one witness shall not testify against any person to cause him to die. So what that's saying is, if one person committed murder and one person witnessed the murder, that one person in and of itself would not be able to cause that person that committed the murder to die, because it would not be seen as substantial evidence, because you need more than one. This is what the scriptures are saying. You need more than one eyewitness, right? This is what it's saying. So let me read it again. Whoso killeth any person, the murderer shall be put to death by the mouth of witnesses, plural, but one witness shall not testify against any person to cause him to die. Bearing in mind, in the last lesson, I explained that the common law is based on the scriptures, and that's why they make you swear on it. So therefore, they have gone against the laws of the Most High and empowered their laws in contradiction to what the Most High is saying. So anything you do in contradiction to the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High is seen as a sin, an iniquity, or a transgression of the law. Yeah? And then I jump to Isaiah, right? So Isaiah 28 is a famous scripture, so everybody knows that. But the way Isaiah 28 is broken down, which is the correct way, I'm not trying to say I'm challenging the breakdown, I actually agree and I love the breakdown. But there's another aspect of the breakdown that I want to bring out, which is, let me bring out. So this is the book of Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 10. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little and there a little. So I don't even have to break it down, because everybody in the truth, and even a lot of people out of the truth, they understand what this means. But what this also means is that one line is actually validating what the other line is saying. So in other words, one line is witnessing what the other line is saying. And also, when you take a precept or a line from, let's say, one prophet, and you match it up with a line from another prophet, that's 2 witnesses as well. That's 2 witnesses. So the same concept that's listed out before in Deuteronomy and Numbers, this is also listing that out as well. Although it's coded, because it's more relating to how you get understanding, but it's also relating to the concept. Right, so now I've finished the precepts, right? So now we're getting into this bill, right? So even before I can even get into the bill, I have to get into a historical analysis of why the bill was deemed necessary. So I'm not even getting into if it was a good bill or bad bill, or what's going to happen when the bill is implemented, because the bill was passed since February. That's what, 8 months ago? No, 7 months ago. 7 months ago the bill was passed. Why did we only hear about it now? We should have heard about it before it was even passed. There's a reason why we're hearing about it now. So anyway, I'm going to read to you. Let me show you, because you know me. So this is the Mississippi Black Code, right? With the date Look at the date, 1865. Do you know what the significance of 1865 is? Because that's the same day slavery was abolished. So basically, the same time slavery was abolished, they started to pass these laws, right? So these laws, or the time period when these laws were being passed, is called the Reconstruction period. So between 1865 and 1919, around that period, which is First World War, our people were actually benefiting from the capitalist system, and we were becoming wealthy, we were becoming entrepreneurs, we were building cities, we had bus companies, we had our own towns, we had our own banks, right? And what happened was, we actually were doing well at the same time, Ayabiam Nawar, right? Because according to the script, according to Nehemiah 5 and 9, that's what all the Goians are. So I just call them that, Ayabiam Nawar, right? So as a result of that, they formed the KKK. The KKK was formed in 1865 slash 1866, which is around the same time period. And all of these things were passed around the same time period. Also, let me just show you this one as well, right? Just get into it straight away so I won't have to do it again. I brought it out the last time, but I need to bring it out again because it relates to why this particular bill that's causing all the problems, not problems, but it's causing like the scare or the everybody to speak on it, right? So there's a reason why everybody's feeling the need to speak on it, right? But there's an issue that needs to come out. If I can find it, let's see. Right, so it's right, here we go. Got it. Took a while, but got it. So this one here, right? So bearing in mind, this was signed exactly when slavery was abolished. So you would assume that when slavery was abolished, we were now free, or we were able to be free. But listen to this. I'm going to read it again. Right. This is the 13th Amendment, written as Amendment 13 of the U.S. Constitution, which was, so they said, signed in 1776. Section 1. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. So what is involuntary servitude? Involuntary servitude is when you're forced, you have a compulsion, somebody's compelling you to work. It's not of your free volition, it's not of your own mind. Somebody's forcing you to work. That's called involuntary servitude or slavery. It's more or less the same thing, right? Listen, except as a punishment for crime. So initial bill, this initial bill, right, is causing an issue. I'm going to show how it caused the issue, but it's causing an issue because what you did, you abolished slavery, and then you passed a law that said, okay, but if somebody's arrested, we can turn them into a slave. Because before this 1865 bill, this wasn't the case. So they created this bill right around the same time as slavery. And then check this now. Let me read the next bit. Right. Wherefore the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So I kind of got into that in the last lesson, so I don't need to go into it. But the key is, slavery wasn't abolished. The mechanism of slavery was abolished. So now we can't grab you up and turn you into a slave, or purchase you and turn you into a slave. Now we have to arrest you, convict you, and then we turn you into a slave. You understand the technology? Right. So check this. So I've read that. So check this now. Right. The black code. So I'm showing you the codes, the laws and statutes that they passed as soon as they abolished slavery. Listen to this. Section 1. All freedmen. So freedmen is defined as free Negroes and mulattoes, but I will add onto this and Indians as well. So they didn't put it, but the Indians as well, right? So they give them the right to sue because they couldn't sue before. But listen to this: provided. So provided means this is the crafty council bit now. So anytime you see provided, that means except that the provision of this section shall not be construed as to allow any freedman, free negro, mulatto, Indian, or indigenous aborigine to rent or lease any lands. So they've restricted them from renting or leasing lands. Listen, or tenements, except in incorporated cities or towns. So what this bill did was force all the free people, our people that were free, that ran off the plantations, it forced them to have to go into the cities, right? Go into the towns, because we never used to live in the towns, because the town we had our own towns, but those towns, what they call incorporated cities, that was the Gawaiian town. So why would you want to go in that Gawaiian town? You didn't go in there for what? But they forced them to. You see it? All right. Let me read that again. That the provision of this section shall not be so construed as to allow any freedman, free negro, mulatto, indigenous aborigine, American Indian, to rent or lease any lands or tenements, which would be them allotments where they plant a little thing there, except in incorporated cities or towns, in which places the corporate authority, so they're letting you know the authorities are corporations, shall control the same. So they're controlling you. So the minute you go into the city, you're under the control of the corporate authority. The minute you stay out of the city, you're liable to be arrested, which will place you back in slavery. You check it. And that's the first section. I haven't even gone into it. Section 2. All freedmen, free Negroes, and mulattoes may intermarry with each other. Right? Well, this one I put in line with the Haftarah. Right? So what they're actually saying here is that we don't want you now being free to go on, especially the men, to go and start having relationships with the white women and having children, right? Because they would see those children as jakes as well, which they are. So they passed a law to prohibit that. That law was only abolished a couple of years ago, you know. When I say a couple of years ago, about 20 or 30 years ago, something like that, or 40 years ago, something like that. Section 3. All freedmen, free Negroes, or you know what, I'm just going to say jakes, because that's what it is. All jakes who do now and have herefore lived and cohabited together as husband and wife shall be taken and held in law as legally married. So this is where the concept of they have married, where you go in court, and there's another form of marriage they have, where if you live with a woman for a certain period of time, you're considered married. That's where that concept comes from. Alright, so boom, boom. Right, so this one's dealing with the vagrancy law. Let me show you this one. Because the vagrancy laws was used to do the same thing as well, right? Every J on the second Monday of January 1866, which is 1866, and annually thereafter, which means from that date and thereafter, have a lawful home or employment, and shall have written evidence thereof as follows, to wit, if living in any incorporated city, that's what they call them, town or village, a license is a permission, a license from the mayor thereof, so you have to get a license from the mayor, listen, and if living outside of an incorporated city, so if you were one of the few brave jays that didn't go to the incorporated cities, even under threat of what it would plan to do to you, you still didn't go. Listen to this. Boom, 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 boom. A license from that mayor, no, I read that already. From the member of the board of police of his beat. If living outside of an incorporated city, town, or village, from the right. So if you're in the city, you have to get a license from the mayor. If you're outside the city, you have to get a license from the board of police or the local police, which is the same law that they apply to us now. This hasn't changed, right? And you should understand when you hear this, you should understand it's the same thing's happening now. Um, Listen to this. Even if you do have an act, or even if you do have a license, listen to this. Section 6 in this act, which license may be revoked for cause at any time by the authority granting the same. So whether the authority be the mayor or the authority be the police or the local beat, they can revoke your license, right? Because a license is just a permission. So a free person should not need a license. Because as I read before in the Declarations of Human Rights, a man has the freedom of movement, the freedom of residence. So this is a restriction of that. Section 6. Listen to this one. All contracts for labor made with jakes for a longer period than 1 month shall be in writing and in duplicate, attested and read to said freedmen of to Jake by same thing by a beat cop, city or county official, or to disinterested white persons of the county. There's no such thing as a disinterested white person because they all come together under one consent. That's what the scripture said. So when it comes to this, they're all under one consent. That's what I believe what the scripture said. Psalms 83. I believe that. And if the laborer, the J, shall quit the service of the employer before the expiration of his term of service, listen to this. So in other words, you're working on a job, you don't like the job, you don't like the pay, you don't like the conditions, you quit the job, innit? What they're saying is, if you do that in this context, listen, before the expiration of the term of service without good cause, meaning your boss has to agree. If he doesn't agree, then it's not good cause. He shall forfeit his wages. Right, so you work for a company for 2 months and a half. You left in a half a month, right? The boss decided, okay, I don't think you should have left, which is what you're going to decide anyway. So he only going to pay you 2 months and you ain't get a half month pay. You'll feel it, but you'll be like, yeah, I know they pay every month anyway, so it was my fault I left. But that's not what they're saying here. What they're saying is, all the work that you did, whether you worked 8 months, 9 months, a whole year, they're docking your salary. So now you have to think, well, how can they dock your salary if you're getting paid monthly or weekly? You know how they dock your salary? They will imprison you and they will make you work off the debt. So you'll be working for a whole year for free. That's how they dock your wages. So in other words, they put you right back into slavery. Right? And that's why I wrote in the notes, shall lose all prior earnings of free men. Right? Right. Section 7. Remember, this was passed when slavery was abolished. You need to understand what this is saying. Section 7. Every civil officer shall and every person may arrest and carry back to his or her legal employer any Jake who shall have quit the service of his or her employer before the expiration of his or her term of service. So this is explaining how the police force was first established because it didn't have police before. Before, what you had was every single Jake was on a plantation, and then you had predominantly the Irish and the Scottish, but you had others as well, including some of the children of Massa with the J Kesses, because they would use their children as well, right? And they would be the ones that would they call them slave catchers or taskmasters, right? So that's basically what they were doing. But when slavery was abolished, what they then did, those same people, what they then did, became slave catchers for a fee. And here's the nasty thing about about this. The fee would have to be paid by the person that they caught, arrested, and re-enslaved. His wages would have to be, well, not wages because they weren't getting paid, but it would be in terms of time. So if he had to work a year to pay off from the service because he quit his job, he may have to work 2 years because now he has to also pay these because the money's coming from him. not coming from the council, he has to pay it back. The council will pay the people when they hand in this. The police or the authority or the mayor would pay the person that caught what they call a runaway slave, but it's actually incorrect term. Runaway freedman, because they were already freed. They'll catch them, bring them back. They will get paid, right? But that money would be deducted from the person as a means of further enslaving him. Yeah. I hope I explained it properly. Right, provided, so we have to always read the provided bit. Provided the said arrested party, after being so returned, may appeal to the justice of peace or member of the board. So you appeal and see what happens to you, even now, right? So appealing now, appealing then would have been worse. So they just put that there to give it an illusion of, yeah, we freed them, but actually they didn't. Section 8. Upon affidavit made by the employer of any freedman, of any Jake, or other credible person before any justice of the peace or member of the board of police, that any Jake legally employed by said employer has here they call it now, illegally deserted said employment. Right? So they criminalize leaving your job. Let me see. It shall be lawful for any officer to whom such warrant shall be directed, and this case, this word warrant actually is proving what I said in the last lesson is correct. Because what they're saying is they were given a warrant to detain in this instance, and if under that circumstance the person does not is not being how to put it, it's not being acquiescent. He's not complying. That's the word. He's not complying to the order, right? In this sense, that would be non-compliance because a warrant was being served. But how they treat our people is not like this. They will stop us, ask us questions, and when we desist from complying, they'll say, "Oh, you're not complying," and then it will escalate the situation. But that's not how it's supposed to be applied by law, which is this is stating it as well. Um, right, section 9. It's more or less saying the same thing as the other section. It's just laying out some more stuff. Um, yeah, but it's stating that you can be. Listen to this. Section 9 is dealing with the same. They call it desertion or illegally deserting from an employer. But in the provision bit, or even before the provision bit, it's saying that they shall be fined not less than $25 and not more than $200. So $200, 200 plus years ago, that's a lot of money. You have to know that. That's not no. So you can't be just got your freedom a month ago, was forced to have to work because they say if you're not working, you're a vagrant. So they force you to work. You quit it because you might have wanted to find your relatives that were on other plantation, or you just reach a point where you're like, I don't want to work for this guy. I was a slave to this guy. They forced me to go back to him. I don't want to work for him, so you quit. So then they say, you committed a crime. And look at the sentence they give you. Not less than $25, no more than $200, right? And shall not immediately, and if it shall not be immediately paid, the court shall sentence, moreover, be liable to the party injured. Salakia, shall sentence and convict to not exceeding 2 months imprisonment in the county jail. So that also goes against the human rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights, which states that you shall not imprison a person that has not been convicted of a crime, right? Or a person that cannot or has not paid a debt. So here, in contravention to that, they're imprisoning people for debt. Let's check this out, right? And oh, by the way, this is also one of the underlying issues that this attempted to address, which I'm going to explain. But this is actually one of the underlying reasons as well, because what they do with our people is when they can't pay the debt or the bond or whatever, they detain us, i.e., imprison us. That's illegal. That's unconstitutional. They're not supposed to be able to do that. But they have been doing that for nearly 200 years. That's the point. All right. Section 10, Section 1. Oh, yeah, this is a serious one. Yeah. Right. An act to regulate the relation of master and apprentice as relates to Jakes. Right. So what they did, if you was a man, I think 20 or 25 years and up, they passed a law that if you're not working, you would be arrested under an act that they call the vagrancy laws. And then when they arrest you, they would lease you back, i.e., it's not called slavery, but it's actually slavery, back to the same plantation that you left, because you would have a skill or you would have an ability that that plantation owner was relying on, right? So they would place you back there where you just left. You were just freed from slavery. They place you back there, and if you chose to run away, they would arrest you again and charge you and fine you as well and place you back there. That's what they were doing, right? So anyway, let me read this. Section 1. It shall be the duty of all sheriff, justice of the peace, and other civil officers of the several counties in this state, i.e., so this actually means it would be the duty of white people. Of, let me not use that word, of Aishawa, Adawam, Ayabiam Nawa, Wa Gawayam, because they use the Gawayam as well, to report to the probate courts of their respective counties semi-annually, right? So, like when a Jake is like teenage, not quite old enough to get arrested, they set these things up when they start getting in trouble where, oh, you have to sign up to a social worker and you have to see the social worker certain days every week, or you might have to go to the probate court, you might have to go to I forget the name of the court now, but civil court or certain agencies that they've created for that purpose, and you will have to sign in. You will have to have a chat with a interview with an officer. They may give you certain things that you may have to do, right? So this same thing that they do to our children now, this is where it started. So let me read it again. Um, State to report to the probate court. That's what you see, probate courts of their respective counties semi-annually. That would be twice a year at the January and July terms of said courts. All Jakes under the age of 18 in their respective counties, beats, or districts who are orphans or whose parents have not the means. Listen to this: have not the means or who refuse to provide for and support said minors. Therefore, it shall be, bearing in mind they had just come out of slavery. This is 1865, 1866. They just come out of slavery, and they were not permitted by force of statute to buy, lease, or rent lands outside of incorporated cities. So they were forced into the cities, and then in the cities they set up unions where you couldn't work. You had the skills, but you were not a union member, so you couldn't work. So you had to do like odd jobs or whatever, or you had to beg or shoe shine or whatever. This was a situation they created. Listen to this. Um, Thereupon it shall be the duty of said probate court to order the clerk of said court to apprentice said minor to some competent and suitable person. So apprentice is another word of, basically that's what happened with was it Isaac? Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. It's Isaac. No, it was Yaakov. So Yaakov went, I think it was to Laban, so I could be wrong. Yeah, he went to Laban. He had to work, so he worked for 7 years for his first wife, for Rachel or Raka'ala, which means powerful power. After the 7 years, when he laid with her, come to find out it was the sister whose name is Leah, which in the Paleo Hebrew would be La'ah. And we know what La'ah means. Her name was La'ah, believe it or not. So he had to work another 7 years to get his wife, and I think he was forced to work another 7 years again to get some sort of substantial gain, to get like like some property and stuff. So, and by the way, that's the same period of time that the Amerindians in Brazil were leaving the land to follow, meaning that they were not touching the land for 20 plus, which I interpret as 21 years. So that would be the same figure, right? So you see how it's linking up? So what they did, the miners 18 and under, they would send them back to the plantation as an apprentice. So now they were back on the plantation having to work for the master. Listen to the powers they gave to the master. Right. Section 2, I think it is. No, wait, let me read it. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, section 2. The said court shall be fully satisfied that the person or persons to whom said minor shall be apprenticed, re-enslaved, shall be a suitable person, provided that said apprentice shall females until they are 18 years old. No, sorry. Provided that said apprentice shall be bound by indenture, so that's an indentured servant, right? So the only difference between an indentured servant and a slave is that an indentured servant has a certain period of time under which he does his work or his servitude, after which he gets some sort of remuneration. He would get some land, or he get some profit, or in the case of Yaakov, he got a wife, whatever. But what was happening to our people was that they weren't getting nothing afterwards. Provided the said apprentice shall be bound by indenture. In case of males, listen to this, until they're 21 years old. So the men, they keep them until they're 20. Bearing in mind, this is after they were freed enough, right? So they couldn't leave the plantation until they were 21 years old. In the case of females, until they are 18 years old, right? Listen to this now, section 3. In the management and control of said apprentice, right, said re-enslaved Jake, said master or mistress shall have the power, so they've given themselves power over somebody that has already been freed according to the 13th Amendment, which we know is a lie, to inflict such moderate corporal chastisement as a father or guardian. So we as fathers or guardians presently don't have the right to chastise our own children, but they've given themselves the right to be able to do that, and they still exercise that right now. Let me see. Father of God is allowed to infliction on his or her child or ward at common law. So that's a common law right. This is what it's saying, which I know that to be true. Provided that in no case shall cruel or inhuman punishment be inflicted. Please, please. Do you know how many people, right, were lynched during this same period? Because this is when it was happening. Lynching was not a common occurrence during slavery. It did happen, but it was not common. Why? Because they were valuable. They were seen as chattel or your property. So why would you lynch your property? It was only done in rare exceptions so that you would have an example for everybody to keep them in line. But during the Reconstruction period, after the KKK were created, this was a common occurrence. Up until, I think it still occurs even now. Let me see. Right, so let me show you. Right. I need a cup of coffee. I need a sip of my coffee, sorry. Go on, Michelle. Right. Section 4. If any apprentice, re-enslaved freedman, shall leave the employment of his or her master or mistress without his or her consent. So you need the consent of your boss to leave your job. Does that even make sense? You need permission to leave your own job. Does that make sense? Said master or mistress may pursue and the person whose job you left may pursue and recapture just listen to the wording. So you can tell it's re-enslaving these people. So which means you never did free them, which we know and we push on the road as the truth. The actual statutes is proving it. I'm surprised people don't read these things out. Right. May pursue and recapture said apprentice and bring him or her before any justice of the peace of the county, whose duty it shall be to remand. That's the word I was trying to remember. That's the word, right? So when you're on remand, Kwame Ashala, when you're on remand, basically you're detained but you haven't been charged. So that's dealing with this as well, right? So all of this, when I read this, it's all gonna make sense. Shall remand. Ah, I've lost the line. Let me read it again. All right. Whose duty it shall be to remand said apprentice, re-enslaved Jake, to the service of his or her master. Even the word in master. Why would you still have the word in master or mistress? If this was a job description, you would have boss, you would have manager, you would have these corporate terms, which we know means the same thing, but they would utilize corporate terms. But they're still utilizing the slavery term, right? Master and mistress. That's what mistress means. A female master, in case you didn't know. Master or mistress. And in the event of a refusal on the part of said apprentice, re-enslaved Jake, so to return, meaning he demanded that he's not returning. Listen to this. Then said justice of the peace, shall commit said apprentice to the jail of said county. Listen to this. On failure to give bond, on failure to be able to pay your bail or raise bail money, that's what this means. Listen. On failure to give bond, on failure to be able to pay your bail, to the next term of the county court, it shall be the duty of said court at the first term thereafter to investigate said case. If the court shall be of opinion that the apprentice, listen to this, left the employment of his or her master or mistress without good cause, to order him or her, listen, to be punished as provided for the punishment of hired freemen. So they have laws of punishment for hired freemen. So that's an oxymoron because you cannot be a free man and be bound or constrained. The minute you're bound or constrained, you're a slave. You're bound. That's what a bondman. That's what bond means. That's what a bondman means. It means you're bound. You're bonded, right? Section 5, Section 6. I'm just reading it through so I don't repeat information. Yes, so this one needs to be read because this is dealing with the vagrancy laws. So the vagrancy laws is one of the most important laws that were passed in the past 200-300 years because the vagrancy laws in England, that would be the sus laws. It's morphed into the sus laws, but initially it was a vagrancy law as well, but now it's the sus laws. It's the same concept, legal concept. So let me read it. Section 1. All rogues and vagabonds, all jakes, because that's what they see us as. Idle means you're not working, according to them. And dissipated persons. So this now is very good as well, because it's showing you how they view us, how they think of us. So listen, I'm just going to read it out. Dissipated persons, beggars, jugglers, or persons practicing unlawful games, or plays, runaways. How can you be a runaway if you're free? If you're a free man, how can you be a runaway? But be that as it may, runaways, common drunkards, common night walkers. So a common night walker is they had a law where when the sun goes down in the cities, a Negro, a Jake, an American Indian, an indigenous Aborigine could not be seen outside. So if you were seen outside when the sun goes down, you would be arrested. So I guess the charge would be arrested for night walking because it's dark and in the night it's dark, so we can't see you, so we don't trust you out there. Pilferers, that's stealing, lewd or wanton or lascivious persons in speech or behavior. So this is giving them the right. If you say words that they deem lascivious, they can arrest you, right? And that they kind of use that as well now, right? Because how can a person have the right to tell you what you can and cannot say? Even if you're saying curse words, how can you restrict a person from saying what you want to say? Only by force of statute. But is it correct to be able to do that? Because there's not. If it's according to the law, our law, if it's according to this, 100%. But this is a man coming up with this. Speech or behavior, common railer. So a common railer would be like people that go to carnival and they're jumping up and common. That's in the common in the public. Railing is whining and jumping up and getting on bad, right? So this is giving them the power to arrest us for doing that because they used to do that as well. Because the whole word orgy, it comes from Greek and Roman practices. That's where it comes from. Even carnival. Carnival comes from the Easter, the worship of Easter and the worship of Ishtar, right? That's a pagan thing. The whole thing is pagan. But they do it. It's part of their laws. It's part of their custom, sorry. Let me see. Anything else? Yes. By frequenting houses of ill fame, gaming houses, or tippling shops shall be deemed. Tippling might be tipple is like taking a drink. I remember that one. Shall be deemed considered vagrant. So all those things I just listed out. If you were caught doing that, you would be considered vagrant. Bearing in mind, I read the Vagrancy Act. So once you're considered deemed a vagrant, they can arrest you, charge you a bond. If you can't pay the bond, which you wouldn't be able to, because remember, this is just after slavery was abolished, so they said. The same time slavery was abolished, they passed this. So you ain't gonna have no money saved up or stored up, right? So then they charge you as being a vagrant. Once they charge you as being a vagrant, they send you back to the plantation you were working on, or they arrest you and they lease you out. So you see, they call it chain gang and stuff like that. So they may need to cut a trail through the swamp to run a train line. So they would lease out these what they call it vagrants to do that kind of work as well, right? This is what they would do. Or dig a trench. Oh, I need to dig a trench so that the water is not going to flood the land or whatever. So dig out a mile-long trench. You lease out these arrested freedmen to do that work for free. By the way, they're not getting paid. The prison's getting paid. The corporate cities are getting paid, but they're not getting paid. So that's slavery reinstituted again. Um, Yes, considered vagrants under the provision of this act, which is called a black code, and upon conviction, therefore shall be fined not, listen to this, not exceeding $100 with all accruing costs, so which means not just $100, but all the costs that result in you being charged. So that would be the said officer that arrested you, detained you, and brought you there. He may have had to carry you from Brixton to Tottenham. That might have taken 2 days. So all the necessary monies that he had to spend in order to accomplish that, food, water, rest, whatever, he would have to be compensated for that as well. All of that is coming off of you, which is called accruing costs, and be in prison at the discretion of the court, right? Is that everything? Because I haven't even gotten on the app yet, but let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, this one I have to read this one because it's showing. So there's two more two more I'm gonna read. Why? Because one's showing. Let me show you it first. So I want you to be able to really see it. Right. Section 2. All Jakes in this state over the age of 18 found on the second Monday in January 1866 or thereafter with no lawful employment or business or found unlawfully assembling. So this is why I have to point this out, because the freedom of assembly they're taken away as well. They took away as well. As soon as slavery was ended, which they didn't have the right to do that before, as soon as they were declared free, they took away all these rights that a free person is bound to have according to law. Freedom of assembly, uh, um, no lawful employment or business, or found unlawfully assembling themselves together, either in the day or night time, and I don't need to read that. Boom, boom. Or living in adultery, right? Their definition of adultery, because how they define adultery is how we define adultery. Or fornication with a freed woman, free Jakes then, shall be deemed vagrant. So every situation which is not crime against anybody, which is not in contravention of the law, so some of them are, fair enough, but the ones that are not in contravention of the law, statutes and commandments, the Haftarah, right, they deemed it under vagrancy. So that word vagrancy doesn't just mean what we think it means. It's a code word they use, or they used past tense, to re-enslave the Jakes after they were freed allegedly from slavery. That word vagrancy, right, shall be deemed vagrant, and on conviction therefore shall be fined a sum. So they're finding slaves that had just come off of the plantation, had worked for 400 years for free, were forced to have to go into cities, right? And those cities were incorporated, could not stay out of the cities because they would be caught up as vagrants and placed back on the plantation they came off. So they didn't have a choice but to go in the cities. When they went in the cities, if they weren't working, which they were not working, why? Because the Europeans had created unions. So you could not work if you were not a member of the union, and freedmen slash Jake could not be members of the union because they were racially, they had racial stratifications embedded in the union codes, or the union bylaws, right? So it was a trap, right? It was a trap that they created. Right. Boom, boom, boom. And then section 3, let me see what it is in section 3 that I'm mentioning. Section 3 is saying more or less the same thing. Right. So, section 4, let me just read section 4 and then I'm going to get to the law itself. Right. Section 4. Keepers of gaming houses, houses of prostitution, prostitutes, public or private, and all persons who derive their chief support in the employment that militate against good morals or against law shall be deemed and held to be vagrant. But the funny thing about this is that if this law was being applied to the Goliath, then all of them would be, according to their own mouth, considered vagrants. But these laws was only specifically aimed at our people. Right. So, is there any more? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I have to read this one as well. Because it's been going for a while, but I have to read this one because this one is relating to freedom of speech and why Christians, even now, have to get a license, 50C13, I think it is, and have to go to seminary school in order to preach because they made it illegal to preach without a license. So let me read that. Section 2. Any Jake committing riots, routs, affrays, trespasses, malicious mischief. And it's funny because how can you trespass on a land where you was living on hundreds, if not thousands of years before the Goans got there, right? So this is to my indigenous Aborigine brothers who were there before Columbus got there. How can they trespass on their own land? It's just ludicrous, but it is what it is. Malicious mischief, cruel treatment to animals, seditious speeches, seditious speeches, insulting gestures, language or acts or assaults on any person, disturbance of the peace. So this is the only one that's a valid reason, right? Because according to law, you're not supposed to commit crime or harm against another person. So if you disturb the peace, if you're disturbing somebody's peace, somebody's rest, then that's seen as a harm, right? In that instance. But the police do that all the time because whether it's day or night, they put their sirens on at full blast, right? So that's actually a breach of peace when they do that. But apparently they're above the law. Where did they get to the? Ah, here we go. So disturbance of the peace, exercising. Listen to this. Exercising the function of a minister of the gospel without a license from some regularly organized church. So this is actually showing how our people, when we came out of slavery, ended up falling into these churches, even though they were the same people that had them enslaved for 400 years, because they were forced to, right? So these are the things that we're not taught, we don't understand. When you're analyzing a situation, you have to analyze as much of the variables, in other words, as much of the reasons why a situation occurred, so that you can unpack or unpick the root causes, and you can arrive at a solid solution. You can't arrive at a solution if you're nitpicking and you're not examining the matter. You're not examining every single variable of what's causing the problem and ticking them off and checking them off. You have to, because if you're not doing there's a precept that my aunt Abadiah always brings out. It's about the Gawaiians have executed a diligent search. We fail in that regard, Yashala. We failed miserably in that. We don't do any diligence at all in our searches, right? And that puts us at a disadvantage because a Yabya Noah, he does a very diligent and he accomplishes it as well. Right, so that's that. There was another one I wanted to read if I could find it. No, I can't find it. So anyway, so now I spent a long time setting up the understanding required to get into this bill. So now, after explaining all the historical events that led up to 2022, there's so many more. I mean, we're all Jake, so we all have testimonies of things that have happened to us and things that are happening to us, right? So as a result of that, what happened in Illinois, where, by the way, in Illinois, in Chicago, it has been proven. I don't want to put the brother out there, but there's a brother that did a video. He's not in the truth, but he's somebody that I listen to a lot. He did a video, and the video, he actually showed where the feds were putting crates of assault rifles, or I don't know what they call them. Because the machines they got now is like, they call them blickies and all that. The machines they got now is something else. With the extended clips, the clips longer than your arm, right? I've seen the videos of them placing them in alleyways in the ends. Those youths are not buying those weapons, because you can't just go in a shop and buy them weapons. They're giving it to them. They're giving it to them by the crate loads, right? Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, all these areas where you see this escalation of gang warfare, which is basically tribal warfare, right? Which is basically something that when you read in Judges, you see it, right? When you read the old like with Rehoboam and Jeroboam, you see it. So this is not a new thing, right? This is something that happens, occurs, right? So anytime we come out of the law, statutes, and commandments, we're susceptible to the curses, and this is where your eye. You know what? Let me read that one. So I said, I promised Israel that I wasn't going to do any more precepts, but this one has to be done. So Deuteronomy 28, yeah, 28 and 54. So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil towards his brother. So this is one of the curses, right? So what happened as a result of that is that when our people were accused of a crime, right, sometimes by one witness, which is against the law, because our laws are supposed to be two or more. So one witness, or it might even be an officer, right, they detain you, they take you to not even to court. So the procedure is they put you on remand. That's the word I was trying to remember. They put you on remand, and there's people that have been in remand for years, right? So as a result of that, it became obvious that something had to be done because wealthy people, they could afford to pay the bond, or they could afford to pay the bail. So what was happening with wealthy people is that they would get arrested, right, for things that they actually did, right. They would pay the bail, and they wouldn't see any time. And then when it comes to the trial, they would most likely get off because they had connections and things. So they would never see any time. But with our people, whether they were guilty or innocent, they would be in remand sometimes for years, which is also a breach as well, because you're supposed to have a speedy trial. You're not supposed to be waiting for a trial for months or years, right? That's illegal as well, right? So let's get into that now. Alright, so this shouldn't be that long. This is the act, right? That everybody's talking about, right? The Illinois Safety Act made some violent crimes non-detainable before trial. Offenses allegedly made non-detainable by the legislation include, and then the list goes on. I don't even have to read it out. This is the list there, right? But there's more as well, right? But here's the thing now. So what this is showing you here is driven by the media. So what happened is the bill was passed in 2002 February. The bill has already been passed. The bill's going to be applied from January 2023, right? So they give it time to work out, how they're going to do it. And so by January, they're going to start to apply it, right? So what happened is we're getting closer to that date. So now media and people, interested people, which we know is the Goliath, they're now thinking, wow, so what? So we can't use this anymore as a mechanism of earning money and also a mechanism of controlling the black male, because it's predominantly between the ages of 16 to 35 is the ages of people that tend to be arrested. I'm not saying that older or younger, but predominantly. So that demographic, that's the demographic they're most in fear of. So that's the demographic they would like to get locked up, which when they lock them up, they now have converted them into slaves. Because they're going to be in there making Levi jeans, they're going to be in there making number plates, they're going to be in there breaking rocks, whatever they're doing, right, generating income, right? And plus the prison industry has been privatized as well. So the money, the tax money that a prison should receive goes to corporate entities. And these corporate entities are also shareholders in other companies. So what they do, they get the inmates to do the work Not maybe like the specialized work, but the generalized work, and that cuts costs. So this is what they've been doing. So let me read it out now. So the claim is in Illinois that the Safety Act, which will go into effect in January 2023, will make some violent crimes, including murder and homicide, non-detainable. What they're not telling you is a person should not even be detained, A, as the scripture said, if it's only one witness, because there has to be two or more witnesses. B, if the person has not been duly convicted, because in our system, you get the judgment after you have two or more witnesses. The person is then brought to the rulers, which would be the head of the tribe, or the patriarchs, or the judge, which would be, well, we did have a king at one time, but the people that ruled us was actually called a judge. So they would make the decision. So if they decided that, okay, yeah, you committed adultery, or you committed fornication, or you disrespected your parent or whatever, then the judgment would be, all right, then you stone the person, right? In certain instances, right, that would be the judgment. But you ain't gonna get the stoning from when the person saw you committing adultery. But this is what they've been doing to us. They've been detaining us based on a charge, and a single charge, not even two or more witnesses, a single charge, and that has been predominantly affecting our people, right? So then, let me get into it now. So this is an assessment of the claim that's being put out, and then the person now that's put this assessment out. I've got the bill. I'm not going to read out the bill, but basically he's illustrating that a lot of what is being pushed by the media is not actually the facts. It's not actually correct, right? It's like scaremongering, right? So let me read it out. What's true? The Illinois Safety Act was signed into law in February 2021. That's true, right? It was called the Pre-Trial Fairness Act. Why? Because it's trying to remedy, or it's trying to correct the fact that we were not getting pre-trial fairness, as I proved to you by reading the Black Codes. Because what you read here in the Black Code, this is what they were doing as law up until, well, it's still going on because this is not in effect yet, right? It was called the Pre-Trial Fairness Act, which will go into effect 1st of January 2023, eliminating cash bail bond in all pre-trial release decisions. Because why should you have to pay to be free when you are supposed to be assumed innocent until proven guilty? When you pay a fine, that means that you're guilty of a crime. If you pay a fine prior to you being proven guilty, then that is unfair, because that's not going according to law. Well, our law anyway, because the Ghanaians, they don't even have a law. They don't understand what law is. Let me see what else. What's force? Um, when any defendant, no, let me read the whole thing. While this act does aim to reduce the number of people detained in jail while they await trial, in other words, while you're presumed innocent, because before you've gone to trial, you're supposed to be presumed innocent, right? So if you're presumed innocent, why are you in jail for 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Being in jail means that you've been found guilty. That's what it means. Just now. So what they said is pre-trial release can still be denied when any defendant poses a specific real and present threat to any person or the community. So what that means is there is a lot of people, there's a lot of Jakes, and I don't care about Jakes really. There's a lot of Jakes that actually are dangerous, actually are committing harm amongst their own people, actually are committing offenses. Generally speaking, those people have the money and the wherewithal because sometimes they scare witnesses into not testifying as well. But what it is, they've given themselves the authority, or they've given themselves the ability to retain the authority to keep those people in prison, i.e., in remand, until the case is called. So the way it's being presented is as if everybody's going to be free now. That's not how it's going to be applied, right? How it's going to be applied is the people that actually did commit the crime. Let's put it like that. They actually did have certain witnesses. The feds most probably had videos on them, and they've got DNA evidence. They've got substantial evidence on them. So even though they haven't been to court, there's enough circumstantial evidence for the judge to say that person's not coming out. They're not. They haven't removed the power to do that. This is what it's saying, right? So that's a scare tactic, because what they're trying to do is force all the people that have been detained, that have been innocent, or maybe not innocent, but they cannot establish, i.e., two or more witnesses, or significant evidence to prove that the person is guilty. The person has not gone to trial. So what they're saying is, it is unfair for you lot to keep a person in jail under that circumstance. Not only is it unfair, it's unconstitutional. It goes against all concepts of law. Even our law, it goes against the concept of law. It actually does. Right? Let me see. Boom, boom, boom. Right. Fact check. In passing this act, Illinois became the first state in the country to abolish cash bail. So when was cash bail created? In the Black Code. So cash bail was created the same time the vagrancy laws were created, which was as soon as slavery was abolished and our people were free to come off the plantation, they created a law called the vagrancy law, and then they created a law called the cash bail, meaning when they charge you as being a vagrant, they charge you a fine, $25 up to $300 or up to $200, which you would not be able to pay because you just came off of slavery for 400-500 years, so you ain't got no money, and you were ordered not to be able to have money as well, so you couldn't pay. So then they re-enslaved you. That's when what they're calling here cash bail started. It's called a reconstruction period. It's called a period when, through statute of law, they re-enslaved the freed slaves. This is what Yasha Al is not getting. Now, I'm not agreeing with. I don't want to come across as if I'm agreeing with the law they passed, because I know how Esau operates. So anytime Esau passes a law, there's a reason why, and it's never what you see. So there's a significant reason why. So for instance, like the Roe v. Wade bill that they rejected, which it should have never passed, because when you actually looked at the law when it was passed, it shouldn't have passed. But this law, when they scrapped this law, it wasn't because of this figure of Jakes being murdered. It was because European people's fertility rate is so low that they're in fear of falling into extinction as a race. So they're grabbing on any means of trying to reprocreate. So one of them is that a lot of their men are mating with JKSs. And why? Because they're trying to strengthen their genes. So you see it now with the young generation. A lot of the Aishashoa is walking hand in hand with the JKSs, right? I mean, it rubs me the wrong way, but it is what it is, right? But there's a reason for that. They're doing that because they're acknowledging that they need to add some melanin to the gene pool. That's one. But on the flip side of that is they still have a fall in fertility rate, so they're trying all means to alleviate that. One being they're removing the option for the Gawaiim, Adawam, right, to be able to have adoption. They're taking it away because they realize that that's one of the strategies that's lowering the fertility rate, or lowering the amount of children they're able to procreate. That's why. That's the reason why they removed that. So yeah, I understand why I show, because remember Psalms 83 is telling you that they are very crafty in their counsel. The things they do, they have a long term plan. But I know that our power, he's work because he's the director of the movie, so he can actually put a thought in somebody's head, or he can so in the case of Pharaoh, he hardened his heart, right? So even though at one point Pharaoh wanted to let us go, he hardened his heart and said, nah, I'm not going to let him go. So the Most High can do whatever he chooses to do, and he can allow a situation to occur, right? Because he's the Most High, he can. Um, so where are we now? Right, so in passing this act, Illinois became the first state in the country. So America has 52 states. I don't know why they call it country, because it's not a country. It's like the UK, actually. It's like the European Union, actually. Because each state in America is a country of itself. Each state of America has its own constitution, right? So this is misleading, but be that as it may, Illinois became the first state in the country to abolish cash bail, defined as payments, listen to this, for jail release for arrested people who are still waiting for their cases to be heard in court. So that's an oxymoron, because if you're arrested, according to law, a person is innocent until proven guilty. In order for you to even bring a charge against a person, you have to have two or more witnesses, right? You have to have substantial evidence to prove that the person that you allege did something did it. That's not how this is operating. This is operating like, for instance, like I could be walking on the road in the night, I could get grabbed up, thrown in a cell, they could put a charge on me, then they could demand a bail, a bond, which I would not be able to afford, and then I'm stuck rotting in remand for a month or 2 months. Then after the trial, hopefully I'm found innocent. That's 2 months of my life is gone. This is what they've been doing to our people, right? So and it's wrong. It goes against our law. It goes against even their law. They created that for us. That's a crafty council. Let me see. Boom, boom, boom. Listen to this now. The no cash bail policy, because it's a policy, is part of the Pre-Trial Fairness Act. So what this act actually is like a form of remedy. So a remedy is a legal concept that a legal authority or a superior power acknowledges that there's a fault and comes up with a remedy, a remedial action to correct the fault. That's what they're saying this is. So they're acknowledging they're at fault. Now when you look at the stats of Jakes that have been arrested before going to trial, so which means they're supposed to be innocent, and you look at how long they've been in there and the numbers of them, is a substantial number. It's a scary number. Let me see. Right, so now he goes into why we're viewing it in the way that we're viewing it. So he said a newspaper clipping have been making a rounds on Twitter and other sites claiming that Illinois was instituted the purge. So the minute you link freeing innocent until proven guilty people back into the community, because they should not have been in detention in the first place, because they have not been to trial, they have not been proven guilty in a court of law, right? But but you're generating income off of them as well, and plus you're charging them a fine, which if they can't pay, they're going to remand, right? So this purge concept, which is like you have a day or 2 days when you can just do whatever you want to do, they've linked a corrective legal policy, which actually, in theory at least, needed to happen. Why? Because they passed those laws illegally to put our free people back in slavery, and all those laws, when you read it, was only targeting our people. So somehow or the other, it was deemed necessary to have a fairness act to make it more fair or make it less imbalanced, right? That's an appropriate word, right? Such policies, according to the tweet, so this is a tweet that was making around, would mean criminals. So to term somebody a criminal is to say that the person is guilty of a crime. But there's a procedure to determine if somebody is guilty of a crime, which is what I read out, i.e., two or more witnesses. You go in front of a judge, right? The judge listens to all sides. You listen to the person that's been accused, listen to the two or more witnesses, right? A judgment is determined, and then the execution of the judgment. That's the procedure. So you can't call a person a criminal, i.e., you transgress the law, until that procedure has been implemented. What they were doing was accusing innocent people of a crime which they may or may not have committed, but that's not the issue. The issue is they accuse a person of a crime, fine, but then they treat the person as if he's guilty of the crime, which is not fine. That's in breach of law, right? Right. So would mean criminals, which they're not criminals because they have not been convicted in a court. If they were convicted in a court, they would not be in remand. So this here is very misleading. They're not criminals. If you said accused persons, fair enough, but they're not criminals because they haven't been found guilty, right? Could no longer be detained. You're not supposed to have the power to detain a person that's innocent until proven guilty. So the fact that you're doing that, which I explained to you how and why they were doing that, the fact that they're doing that means that there's something wrong here. Could no longer be detained or required to pay bail in order to be released for violent offences. Right, so what they do, they highlight the violent offences, i.e., oh, this person attempted murder, or this person attempted rape, or whatever, whatever. But when you read the law, statutes, and commandments, you see the same offences in there, right? So when it says, if you murder somebody, then you shall be, blood for blood, foot for foot, eye for eye, all of that. When you see that, that did not occur when the person was accused of it. That occurred after the full procedure took place. You didn't just accuse somebody of oh yeah, this person committed adultery and you just stoned them to death. Even with Yahushua, when Yahushua was dealing with a woman, you will see what happened. Right? Yeah, they wanted to, because basically according to my memory, she was seen by two or more people, so they wanted to execute the judgment, and Yahushua just did what he did, which is basically convict them in the heart. But actually, there should have been a procedure, right? So yeah, you caught the person. I think in that instance you could, because you got two or more witnesses. But generally, what you do, you bring the person to the judges. The witnesses, they testify, the person testifies, the judge, and the judge would be in the spirit as well. So the judge would execute the judgment, and that would be it. That's the procedure. You don't bypass the steps. That's incorrect. Right, so they list the most inflammatory charges, which is like drug-induced homicide. That means you committed a crime under a drug influence, under the influence of a drug, arson, aggravated battery, kidnapping, and more. So these are all heinous crimes. But the thing is, this particular act gives the judge or gives the police the power to detain. these particular people. That's what it says, right? So they're using the most extreme cases, but they're not fully explaining it, right? So let's see. Right. So this has some of the actual information that is being cited. So let me just read it out. No cash bail policy. What does the law actually state? To explain, it's necessary to understand why there have been calls to abolish cash bail in the first place. According to the Center for American Progress, which is a body that does research and so on, right? 3 out of 5 people sitting in United States jails have not been convicted of a crime. So, in other words, 3 out of 5 people are innocent because, according to law, you're innocent until proven guilty. So, this is actually saying that more people, and we know who predominantly is in prison: Jakes, Latinos, and indigenous Aborigines, Native Americans. That's a fact. So, what this is saying is 3 out of 5 of that group have not been convicted of a crime, which means they're innocent. I'm not saying that they haven't committed a crime. What I'm saying is they have not been proven guilty of committing the crime. Legal terminology. Amounting to nearly, look at the figure, to nearly 500,000 people languishing in jail cells before trial, right? And we know who people this is. This is in part due to the cash bail system, which was created here, 1866, operated by most jurisdictions across the country, that the center describes as, listen, criminalizing poverty, which is what it does. People who are unable to afford bail remain in detention while awaiting trial for weeks or months, and I would add years. And the effects of this process are felt mostly by impoverished communities of color, by James. Right. So this is the balance of it, because we haven't been getting this information. We've been getting the scaremongering information. And I'm not saying that that information is incorrect, but what I'm saying is we have to do a diligent search, and we can't just react based on, especially Goayam, because all these things are driven by Goayam. We have to use the law, statutes, and commandments as our lens, as our lie detector, right, in order to filter anything. So any information you get, it has to filter based on the law, statutes, and commandment, and then you will clearly see what is going on, right? I'm looking for some. Oh yeah, this is a good one, right? Indeed, the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, that's another statutory body that also does research, reported that of 100 individuals who have bail bond hearing, I would add 100 Jakes, but it is what it is. 34 are detained pre-trial, so that would be like a third. Let me see, 30. No, a little more than yeah, a third. It would be a third. Are detained pre-trial due to inability to pay cash bail, right? Which is what this was. This is why I took the time to read it, right? Nationwide in 2009. So this is based in figures of 2009. Those figures have escalated way past what you see in here. Because if this is 2009, in 2010 or 2020, this is way past this. Let me see. Covering the cost of bail is too often prohibited for many defendants, meaning that it's impossible. It's not possible for most defendants to be able to pay bail. Right? Who can listen to this? Who can languish there for years? Right? Innocent because you haven't been proven guilty. I'm not saying that you have not committed a crime. I have to clarify that. What I'm saying is, according to law, a person is to be assumed innocent or presumed innocent until proven guilty, which you can only prove them guilty in a court of law with a jury of their peers. Right? So prior to that, you are supposed to be assumed innocent according to law. Death for years without trial. Many point to the case of Khalif Browder in New York to decide the case, who at 16 was held in Rikers Island. So Rikers Island is one of the worst prisons in the United States of America. Right, it's one of the worst. Right. So a 16-year-old boy was in Rikers Island for 3 years, from 2010 to 2013, without being convicted, which means he was innocent because he wasn't proven guilty, right? So, for a 16-year-old to be exposed to some of the most hardened, serious Jakes and, Latinos and Latin Kings and all them guys there, right? Oh man, I don't even want to think about what happened to that guy there. Right. Because his family could not afford the $3,000 bail. They couldn't even afford $3,000, right? Accused of stealing a backpack, Browder killed himself 2 years after his release, right? I mean, that's horrible. Well, it is what it is. In the state of Illinois, based on 2016 data, listen to this, 90% of those held in jail statewide were in a pre-trial detention status. So what they're saying there is 90% of the prison inmates are actually people that have not been deemed guilty by lieu of going to a court and having a court trial and being found guilty. So in other words, if there's 10,000 people in Pentonville prison, or what's the one in Brixton again? It will come to me, but the Brixton prison or Pentonville prison, if there's 10,000 people, 9,000 of them had not been proven to be guilty. So which means 9,000 of them actually should not have even been in there because they were not proven guilty. I'm not saying that they didn't do anything. Listen to what I'm saying. They had not been to court and been proven guilty by a court and a jury of their peers. So which means according to law they should be assumed innocent and treated as such, which they're not, right? Affecting more than, and they give you a number, 267,421, right? That's the number they give you. And that's per year, right? That's per year. So that's like a quarter of a million. Yeah, that's a quarter of a million per year, right? From 1866 to 2000, because it's still going on, to 2020. You know how much people that is? Do you understand what it is that they were doing? Wow. This is serious. This is really serious. Their research also found that overuse of that's overuse. I mean, 90% of a if you got 100% prison population, what they said is 90% is pre-trial. That is more than overuse. That's not 50%. That's 90%. Come on, man. Oh man. Let me get there again. No. On pre-trial, the Act states. So this is where the media has been introducing the fair tactics. So let me bring it out. The Act states pre-trial release may only be denied when a person is charged with an offence listed in, and they give you the section, or when the defendant has high likelihood of willful flight, and after the court has held a hearing on the section, and they give you the section. But here's the thing now. Our people do not have the ability of flight, especially in the US of A, right? They do not have the ability, for the most part, to even hop on a plane and fly out of the country, or even drive out of the country. They don't have that. The people that have the ability for willful flight are usually the Gawaiians. They're the ones that usually. So, for instance, like I'll give you an example. After 9/11, when the situation occurred, they stopped all flights from flying in and out. But at the same time, you could do the research. Members of the Bin Laden family were flown out, and there was quite I think it was numbering in the thousands of them, were flown out of the Americas. And this is while a flight shutdown was in place. So I just said that just to illustrate that they can and will be able to get out, fly out, whereas it's very difficult for us to. Right? Very, very difficult. Right. Right. The offences listed under section 110-6.1, which is the section that they were alluded to before. Let me just read it. The defendant who is charged with a forcible felony offence, so now they're getting into definitive kinds of offences, right, for which a sentence of imprisonment without probation, periodic imprisonment, or conditional discharge is required by law upon conviction, meaning you went to court and you were found guilty, and it is alleged that the defendant's pre-trial release poses a specific, real and present threat, which in some instances is a reality. Let's be honest, it really is, right? Um, it is alleged that the defendants, I read that, in Illinois, forcible felony refers to, so listen to this now. Forcible felony, treason, first degree murder, second degree murder, predatory criminal sexual assault, child, aggravated criminal sexual assault, criminal sexual assault, robbery, burglary, residential burglary, aggravated arson, aggravated kidnapping, aggravated battery, resulting in, let me show you. Right. Because I forgot to show you. Kidnapping, aggravated battery, resulting in great bodily harm or permanent disability or disfigurement, and any other felony which includes the use of threat of physical force or violence against an individual. This act goes on to include stalking, aggravated stalking, domestic battery, discharge of a firearm, and more. Under the new law, judges will consider, so that means that they do not have a right, they still have to go, it would be considered a pre-trial, so they will go to a judge and the judge would consider based on these charges and based on how to put it, the risk of harm, um, each case on an individual basis. We already know what this is code. So when it says individual basis, we already know what this is saying is if it's a J, they ain't coming out. If it's a Goyim or Adawam or Elamite or whatever, they will get the consideration. Because remember, it's a judge making a determination. So we already know. You don't have to worry about that. So this whole thing that they're pushing, you do not have to worry about that. Because if you're Jake and you go in front of a court, in front of a judge, they've already deemed you guilty. So they ain't letting you out because you're not. It's not a right. The way they're pushing it in the media is that when the bill is passed, you're gonna have the right to. That's not what it's saying. You're not gonna have the right not to be detained. But now they cannot just detain you without a procedure. That's what this is saying. And those same charges that they were scaring people with, they're the same charges that they're saying if you committed any of them, you have to go in front of a judge. Now, bearing in mind, this is not a court. This is to determine if you would be able to walk out, which we already know if you're Jake, it ain't gonna happen. You already know that. So, I don't know what all this panic thing is about. Where did the misleading claims about the case come from? And this is what needs to come out. So I'm past 2 hours, so let me just read this quickly. Why? Because this is necessary information. Because somebody's driving this. Somebody's driving this. So let me just read this. The claims in the tweet quoted above are in line with the numerous Republicans had been saying about the pre-trial reforms in the Safety Act. So what it is, the Republicans who are they in power? No, they're not in power at the moment, but they have a lot of power in the Senate and they have a lot of influence. They had an issue with it, because they most probably were the ones that were benefiting the most from the pre-trial system as it was, because automatically you could charge a Jake, detain him, right, fine him. So the best case scenario, they fine you and you pay the fine. The worst case scenario is they fine you, you can't pay the fine, so you're rotting in jail, you're doing labor for free, because that's what the 13th Amendment is about. Also, all the costs that it entails in imprisoning a person or detaining a person, that money comes through the taxes, and because they privatize the prison industry, the corporations are benefiting, and most of these Republicans actually are shareholders in those corporations. So that's a conflict of interest as well. What they're doing. Let me see. So now they're going to do some name dropping now. For example, Illinois State Representative Patrick Windhorst told the media, so there are a whole list of violent crimes, burglary, robbery, arson, which are basically the same ones I listed out earlier, right? Almost all drug offenses, even drug distribution. Now, when it says almost all drug offenses, let me just make a point. Most of the Jakes that have been arrested and are doing time in America is predominantly for weed. I think the same thing might be true here. So I'm not saying that they don't distribute other drugs. I'm not saying that. But the predominant, what they call a drug, that Jakes are being arrested for is weed. And even though they decriminalize weed, they still arrest them for it, right? I just want to qualify that. DUI offenses, that's driving under the influence, even DUI offenses that are involving a fatality, that do not qualify for detention. And so that's actually incorrect, because I read the act. So when you read the act, that's actually not what it's saying. So he's saying something that's very inflammatory to the news, that's not actually correct to what the law is saying, what the act is saying, right? So the guy said, where did the claims come from? So it came from State Representative Patrick Windhurst. Um, Another source was mailings of articles similar to the claims in the above tweet criticizing Pritzker and the Safety Act came up in a Chicago Tribune investigation that found they were tailored to specific areas and sent to voters throughout Chicagoland under such labels as Chicago City Wire, right? So we all know the Wire. I've seen the Wire, Chicago City Wire, DuPage Policy Journal, and Will County Gazette. So this is he's listing out where this media source or the media sources are, and are filled with purported news articles containing misinformation about the effects of criminal justice reforms enacted under Pritzker. The mailings contend the new law would free dangerous criminal suspects from jail and unleash them into the suburbs, which is why they likened it to purge, right? But this is like scaremongering. Now I'm not saying that when the act is being implemented, that there's going to be people that are going to be released that should not be released. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you should not have been able to arrest and detain a person that is innocent until proven guilty. But because I researched the laws that created the whole concept, which is the black code, I realized that the reason why they were doing that is because their fair, Public Enemy said it in their album, Fair of a Black Planet. So I would change black to Jake, Fair of a Jake Planet. So their fair is the turnaround, when which is why they made the movie Planet of the Apes as well. So when the turnaround occurs, when the 180-degree turn has occurred, that's what they're afraid of, because they don't fear us. Individually they may or may not, I don't know, but as a collective they don't fear us, because they've already gone past that point where they're afraid of us, right? But what their fear is return of a Jake Planet. That's what they're afraid of. Right. So he listed out the state representative that was pushing the misleading claims. It listed out the media, listed out and named the media outlets that were pushing the incorrect claim. Let me go on to say the Tribune investigation described political mail-ins similar to the one posted in the above tweet. So politicians were mailing, they have mailing lists, and they were mailing this. So they were trying to create order of chaos. They was trying to create a panic situation and then come with a solution, which is, oh, we need to shut this bill down before it's passed. So they're trying to create a buzz. It's like a spin. Right. Pritzker claimed these mailings, which I just mentioned before, were the work of racist political consultants and right-leaning. So right leaning to the right is like conservative or Republican. So that would be like Margaret Thatcher, Boris Johnson. That's to the right, right? So the people that tend to see us as a threat are right leaning politically, right? I'm trying to be subtle in the words I use, right? And right leaning radio show host Dan Profit, who also is a financial backer of Republican gubernatorial candidate Darren Bailey. Profit in turn challenged Pritzker to name one specific item in the newspaper you excoriate that is untrue or inaccurate. He also dismissed Pritzker's concerns about the publication. So what they did, they basically what they did to I don't want to call his name, right? 'Cause I don't want to get flagged, but the guy that was formerly the head of the Labour Party, how they shut him down. Right, we all witnessed how he got shut down. That's how this guy got shut down. Because remember, the media are the ones that control the narrative, and the companies that are in line with the media. Let me see. A number of Illinois state attorneys subsequently wrote to the Chicago Tribune that there had been spikes in crimes since the passage of the Safety Act. So that is scaremongering as well, because the Safety Act has not been activated yet. It hasn't been put into practice yet. So that's scaremongering. So what they're trying to say is, oh, there's already an escalation. How can there be an escalation when they haven't put it into use yet? Really? So it's not like, oh, they put it into use and then after they checked and they said, oh, crime went up 20%. No, it hasn't been applied yet. So if there's an escalation, there's other mitigating factors. Um, right. All right. So yeah. So this is something that I think could be a viable option for a lot of situations. Right. So I'm going to read it. For instance, violent offenders, not necessarily for violent offenders, but for certain offenders who are released on electronic monitoring. So that's something that could be used for somebody that you suspect is guilty of certain crimes, right? Not the ones that I listed out, but other crimes, right? You can't prove him to be guilty because he hasn't been in court, but just for public safety, you put a tag on him, right? So that could be used for like somebody that was accused of being a pedophile or something like that. That would be effective, right? Me personally, just take them out, but I'm just dealing with this act, not what I think. Um, yeah, the eliminating bail clearly contradicts previous. I need to show you this, right? Because a goyim is a goyim is a goyim, right? So I read to you the establishing laws and acts. That's why it took so long, because I took the time to establish the historical context of the acts or the policies that needed to be remedied and why they needed to be remedied. Listen to what this bugger said. Excuse my language. Eliminating bail clearly contradicts previously established and superior law, i.e., the Goyim signed it, to get the jakes back into place, places crime victims at a greater risk to be re-victimized. The funny thing is, that's what they did, because they took people that just were freed from slavery and re-enslaved them, and they were the victims. So that's what they did. These demonites, man, and unnecessarily subject witnesses to threats and intimidation, they claim. Now, let me tell you something. Most of the time, when victims are being intimidated, the individual that committed the act or is alleged to have committed the act, he's not the one doing the intimidation, you know, bro. And if these guys are clicked up, well, a lot of them are, he's not the one that's doing the intimidation. So this is not gonna stop this particular situation. It's very rarely that because the person that is charged for action, he's conscious that he's being surveilled, and he's conscious that at that particular time he can't, get his hands dirty. So what he's gonna do, or she's gonna do, because women are likewise inclined to commit crime as well, is that they're gonna get their guys or their girls, or vice versa, to deal with the situation. So I don't. This is illogical. It doesn't make logical sense. All right, domestic violence advocates. All right, fair enough. I agree with that one. So even if they haven't been proven guilty, once the assumption is there, the woman or vice versa, because what's also not being told is that a lot of men are victims of domestic violence as well. The figures are quite alarming when you see them, right? So oftentimes the men, well, I won't say men need protection, but men are getting battered as well. Let me see to the end. Ultimately, the goal of the reform is to determine, so which means it's not automatically given. It's determined, right? Determine pre-trial release, not on the basis of whether a defendant can afford to post bail, which is what this was, but on the risk posed by the person to others, which makes more sense because a crime is a harm. That's the definition of a crime, to commit a harm. So a lot of the things they say, oh, you committed a crime, they're not crimes because it's not harm. You haven't harmed anybody. But when you have, or somebody's under threat of harm, this is where you have to take a different kind of action, right? Where is it? Right, posed by the person. Contrary to what the pamphlets or online posts claim, and that's what I found. It does not allow pre-trial release without a judge considering the severity of the case. So, Israel, I'm going to end it there. I know I went extremely long, but the reason why I went extremely, I think it's the longest lesson I've done so far, but the reason why I had to go this long is because in order to establish the point, and not even my point, it's the point, I had to do a historical analysis of what happened that led to somebody determining that we need to address a situation. And bearing in mind, when you look at the statistics of the people that are in prison, it's something like 80, I would even go so far as to say 85% to 90% Negro or Jake, Latin America, Latinos, right? Amerindian or Native American. So these things is us that is affected, right? So this remedy, like I said, it's not going to be applied 100% how we think it will. Why? Because you cannot never trust thy enemy. For as iron rusted, so is his wickedness, right? I read Psalms 83. A gift destroys the heart. So when they give you something, there's something behind it. So I'm not trying to put it out there that, oh, this is a good thing. What I'm trying to do is give you a balance so that you can fully understand what is taking place and the dynamics behind it, right? Because we're not supposed to be fearful, right? But there's one other thing, before I close out with my prayer, there's one other thing that I want to illustrate. Because what this is illustrating is a reversal, a 180-degree reversal of an established Gawaiian law, as did this one, right? So to me, through the Spirit, what this is telling me, that law, the Safety Act, the Roe v. Wade abolition, what that's telling me is that Esau's system is being turned. So as the apostles said, for this year is the year of the turn up. They are right and exact, right? So I have to put that out there. They're right and exact as they usually are. So let me give all praises and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Wahat, Rakah, Kodash, Wafla Babam, Badla Babam. Yeah, Shalom.